Hello everyone, welcome to another session, and today we're gonna learn how to install Docker on Linux. My name is Usman Ahmad and I work at Grafana Labs as a senior developer advocate, and I have been in the IT industry for more than 15 years, and now I am writing technical tutorials, creating videos, and just try to help everyone on the open source community. And you can contact me or connect with me by scanning this QR code as shown on this slide. Today we're gonna learn how to install Docker, and this is how we follow the steps. So first we will see what are the system requirements and how to check them. Then the next step will be installing the Docker engine, which means installing the Docker server. And after that we see how to configure it correctly and test it out if things are working fine. Also, we will learn if we need to, then how we can uninstall the Docker service correctly without causing any problems. So let's get started. This is my documentation which I'm gonna use, and I will share this with you in the video description link. So it will be also available for you, and please use it. Find any issues or problems so that we can improve it. So the first step is to install Docker, and this is the part one. Part two will be using Grafana, but in this case, it's just the initial part is to set up the Docker server. And now let's take at the system requirements. System requirements is basically something very important, and you may found many articles or tutorials on the internet, but not so many discuss about the system requirements. And why is it important? Because even though you may have installed Docker correctly, but you do not know like if it is working as it should be. So knowing these things is really important and beneficial for your use case, especially if you're using it for the production environment. So the first step is to see about the operating system. So Docker do supports various operating systems like CentOS, Linux, Debian, Ubuntu, Red Hat, and so on. And and you can find about your operating system by using this command. So let's copy it, and this is my virtual machine which I'm gonna use to run this command. Uh, by the way, if you do not have a virtual machine, then in my previous video I explained how to create a virtual machine using VirtualBox, which is really easy. And for any of those who are new in learning Linux, that video is really beneficial because it is the simplest way to install a virtual machine without going into any complications. So please have a look into it. So here now we will see what is the operating system we have and its version. So after writing this command OS release, I see that I'm using CentOS Linux and the version is 7. So this is the version which we're gonna use to install Docker on on our machine. You may can use some others, and for that, if you are using some other Linux distribution which may be not listed here, you can use this link and you can find more detail about it. The second part is the architecture. So Docker supports 64-bit operating system architecture, and on ARM devices both 32-bit and 64-bit. To find out what is the architecture of your machine, you can use the lscpu command. So let's use it. And here you can see that the architecture is 64-bit. Let me make it more bigger. So yeah, this is the 64-bit architecture using the lscpu command. We found it, and what it means that our CPU can do operations in both 32-bit application and for 64-bit applications as well. So this is good. Now comes to the kernel version. So Docker requires at least kernel version 3.10 or higher, and we can verify this by using this command uname-r. So let's do this. So in our case, it's basically 3.10. So this is we are on the borderline, but it will work. So because it comes with the it is the requirement, and we do have this requirement. So you see that this is important to know, like what is the kernel version and knowing the architecture type. And this is why we are going through with system requirements. let me clear the screen. So the next one, I think, yeah, this is the CPU. So for CPU, basically Docker do support modern CPUs, but to find out if you may are using any virtualized extensions. So for example, I am using a virtualization extension, and I have enabled it in my BIOS settings, in my system BIOS setting. And to see that my system or my machine supports it, run again the lscpu command. And here you can see that I have virtualization enabled, and it says VTX. So VTX means that is an Intel one, and you can see also the model name here as well, which is showing Intel. And if you are using AMD, then you may see something here instead of VTX, something AMD minus V. So again, this is an important part to know if CPU is supported in your machine for virtualization or not. Then comes to the part of knowing the RAM and disk space. So RAM and disk space both are important, and for RAM at least you need 2 GB of RAM for your Docker, and disk space at least 20 GB. Now I want to just mention this here, that if you are supposed to be running multiple containers or such applications which requires more than 2 GB of RAM or 20 GB of disk space, then it's more better to increase the size of RAM, maybe up to 6 or 8 GB, as long as what you have in your machine, and also for the disk space, because that way you will not having errors, for example, out of memory or running out of disk space. So, and these are the commands you can use to find out about memory and disk space. Now we come to the part of installing the Docker engine on CentOS. So as we learned that I am using CentOS 7, so the primary command I will use for installing or updating packages is yum command. If you are using, let's say, CentOS 8 or 9, then you can use dnf. Dnf is the default command on these versions of CentOS. Till CentOS 7, it is yum only. And we need to note one more additional information, that make sure to have CentOS extra repository is enabled. And how we can do that? We will run the command, let me clear the screen. So we will run the command yum repo list. And here we can see that CentOS 7 repo, which is CentOS 7 extra, which is the repo name, is enabled, and that is why it is showing here. So again, this is good, and we again qualify for this requirement as well, which is the OS requirement. Now the next step is that we have to uninstall any obsolete or old or any dev unstable version of Docker if we have previously installed on our machine. And to do that, we simply copy paste this command and we run it here. And in our case, we don't have any old packages of Docker which are installed on our machine. So again, this is good in our case. Now, finally, we come to the part where we have to set up the repository, so which will help us to install the Docker. Now, on the Docker documentation website, or the official documentation by Docker, you can install Docker by using either using the repository, which we are going to discuss, or using direct package, RPM packages, for example, or using binaries or source. I would always prefer to use the repository. And the reason is why? Because repository is very easy to install any packages, and it is very safe. So all we need to set up a repository in our system, and we use the yum command to install the required packages. And whenever we need to update the packages, we again run the yum update command. And that way we don't need to do any manual operation. This avoids breaking the packages or going into too complexity. So if I would highly encourage for those who are new or learning Linux, try to use the repository, as it is the more safer and convenient approach to install any packages. So let's set up the Docker repository. And to do that, we have to install this tool called yum utilities, which will provide us this command option yum config manager. So let's install first this yum utility. So I copy it, and in my case I have already installed it in my system. So this is good. If in your case it is not, then you have to just install it using this command. Now we add this repository in our Docker. Basically it's the Docker repository, and we will add it into our system. So let's do this. Okay, and we have now this repository added in our system. Now to install the Docker engine, we have to install these packages. So here we can see that we will installing the Docker CE package, which is the main core engine, and then the Docker CLI. There is a part for containerd. There is a package for compose plugin, and there is a Docker build X plugin as well. So let's install it. And it is asking us or telling us that these are the packages are going to install, and then asking us like, should we proceed? Yes, we need to. So we press Y, and it may take a little bit of while to get installed. Perfect. So now all of these packages are installed. And in case if you get prompted for accepting a GPG key which matches this fingerprint, then just accept it by pressing Y, and the installation will continue further. Now we have to start the services, and to do that we run this command systemctl start docker, and we also have to start the containerd, which is part of the Docker. So now these both are started. Let's check their status. So let's check the status of Docker. Good. It's started, it's active, it's running, and there are no errors. And we do same for the containerd. And this also looks good that the containerd service is active, running, and there are no errors, only info logs. So now we are very close to finishing it up, and all we need to make sure that Docker is installed and working correctly. We run our test Docker container image, which is called hello world. So we copy paste this command. So docker run hello world. What it will do is that it will pull this image from the server, which is located on hubdocker.com, and we should see this message hello from Docker with some details. And this is the whole idea, that after this container image print out this message, it will exit automatically. But this ensures that it can pull out images from the server, and it can show the data, and it means that Docker is correctly installed. Now the last part is to enable these services so that the next time you reboot your machine, you don't need to start them manually. And to do that, we use the systemctl command and use the enable option on our services. So it will be like this, that systemctl enable docker.service, and now a service will be active in the next boot. And we do same for the containerd service. Excellent. Now we have done this part. Um, Uninstalling Docker. So let's suppose that you install Docker, even everything works fine, and you may not need it, or in other case that you install Docker but it's not working fine because some packages are uncompatible, or your system architecture does not match, or the requirement does not match. You need to uninstall it, and to do that you have to use this command. Just simply copy paste it and run it on your machine, and it will uninstall of the packages. So this is the step one of the uninstall process. The second step is to remove any local data. So Docker by default store all its all your files or information in var lib docker directory. So you have to delete this whole directory using the rm command, which is like remove using rf. So it will remove it forcefully. And you also have to do same for the containerd. That way, when next time you will install Docker and it works correctly, you will not have any leftover data. So you will start with a fresh new installation with a fresh new data, and this is much better to avoid any confusion. So this is the whole part of setting up Docker, which is the part one. I am also working on the part two, which is installing Grafana using Docker, where we learn how we can set up a Grafana image and use it via Docker. It will be about both Docker CLI commands with Grafana and Docker Compose as well. So stay tuned. It will be a very interesting one. So yeah, thank you very much. Please comment on this video. Let me know your thoughts, what you like, what can be improved. If you feel or find something which is not discussed in detail, let me know. I will try to improve the documentation as well and explain it more further. Thank you again. Take care. Bye bye.